Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is extremely important, and they're probably going to make it hard for me to explain. I urge you to watch this several times, to take notes, and to put your questions in the comments. This video is about why people are killing themselves at record rates and why martyrs fight to the death. It is what they don't tell you about the next phase of colonialism, what some people call the New World Order. Not a big fan of that phrase because it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but what the phrase means directly, right? A new world order, the next phase of colonialism, and the world order, the order of secular, worldly people who refuse to do what's right, who insist on being in charge. So that part of it, that idea is clearly correct. The most important thing they're leaving out is who is right and exactly what to do about the New World Order and why. And it connects to the reason why you're here. So point number one. This has everything to do with good versus evil. The principles of universal morality, right? The universal principles of being good versus the universal principles of being evil. For example, the devil is said to be the deceiver. So he's conning you. He's conning you how? In the philosophies of the concrete jungle, which includes controlled opposition, indigenous philosophies. Almost everyone on the planet is lying to you. I'm not lying to you. But almost everybody else, if not everyone else, is. And you'll see why shortly. So the devil is the deceiver. It's a con. A demon is said to be a skilled performer, which goes back to Dionysus, who's said to be a young Satan, aka a young Zeus, who's a deity of ritual madness, religious ecstasy, the harvest, grapes, rapes, evil, confusion, what have you. Theater arts. Dionysus is a deity of theater arts. And he's key in why the Phantom of the Opera was a very famous show, what have you. The Phantom of the Opera, aka the Phantom of the Theater, aka the spirit of Dionysus expressing itself in a story in popular culture. If you have any questions about that, put in the comments. Let's get to the next point here. So now we need a point of reference, because when I say the Royal African Falcon Martial Order, you don't know what I'm talking about. So we need to use a point of reference that's like a pagan point of reference that you understand, because no monotheistic point of reference comes closer in popular culture than this pagan point of reference, and it's very strange. And that pagan point of reference is Shaka Zulu and the Zulu tribe. Why? Because God is called God Almighty, okay? And he's a soul brother, and he's strong. He's depicted as tall and strong and very athletic, very smart, okay? The Zulu's religion, as far as anyone can tell, is not entirely correct. But they're the best point of reference that you're going to get, basically, when it comes to what is the opposite of the concrete jungle, the socially engineered concrete jungle, the illusion-based construct of the West, of colonialism, which is the concrete jungle. So when we think of islanders, right, they might be nice, a lot of their females are attractive, historically, but they're too nice, right? They're not very adverse to the concrete jungle. They assimilate. When we think of, say, Arabs, think of an indigenous Arab tribe. You don't really know what to think. And they're not as mighty as a Zulu tribe. You're not going to find any Semitic tribe that's as mighty as the Zulu tribe is depicted in the Shaka Zulu BBC series. So when we're trying to help you understand extreme and mighty adversity in the name of the supernatural through the natural, it's easy to explain it using the Zulu tribe and to make corrections from there. So it's like a morally precise Zulu, which wasn't a morally precise order, right? Order. So the morally precise version of that was with a divine martial arts style leading it, which conquered all the other styles, including the Zulu style. So that might be a little bit confusing, but this is key here because this video is about the difference between good and evil. It is about why people are killing themselves. And when you're confused by the con in the concrete jungle, and there's a bunch of guys with wigs or their descendants who are condescending, and they're using Freemasonry and corporations and the government and social clubs and gentlemen's clubs and secret societies, etc. They're using intelligence agencies and law enforcement. They're using the military and the military-industrial complex. When that occurs, people start wanting to give up on life because what they're doing is unnatural. They evolve for hundreds of thousands of years, really, depending on when you started. You might start as a single-celled organism. They evolved for a long, long time before that. But somewhere around 300,000 years or so, the modern humans start emerging, as the story goes. And they've emerged to be natural and to find fulfillment and completion in a natural life. So here comes this concrete jungle, and it's unnatural. But part of that is a bunch of people say namaste, a bunch of people who are woke, a bunch of people who are in various indigenous tribes all over the world, some of them who are more authentically in their indigenous culture. But no offense to anybody, their cultures are wrong. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's an indigenous tribe in, instead Europe, or the Middle East, or Asia. And they believe that their king is magically the prince of the universe, is magically God incarnate, magically something. And there's a bunch of other tribes that believe that. They can't all be right? So we got to look at characteristics. Say, if your chief or king is God's son and not these other guys, what proof do you have? We see it in the Bible. When the Jews say to Jesus, they say, what proof can you show us that you're who you say you are? And he explains it. He says, this is why you should believe that I'm the Son of God. The works I do in my Father's name, God set me apart. And of course it's figurative, and he's referring to the fact that he's the heavenly warrior who will defeat the beast in Revelation 19. Okay, so point number 3. Let's talk about movies here and propaganda. So what is the concrete jungle like? The concrete jungle is like a movie, right? Because Dionysus, who's like the god of the concrete jungle, a young devil, where Zeus is his older devil counterpart, he's kind of went insane, where Dionysus in many ways can be seen as the brains. Zeus can be seen as a crazy old man who just likes to use his knowledge of things to rape people and abuse people and pretend to be important and so on and so forth. So when people watch a movie like Captain America, they know that it's fake and they get into the movie anyway, right? They get into a certain spirit to watch the movie. And I'm not saying you shouldn't watch movies, but I'm saying that's what occurs. And it's propaganda. He's a fake hero. And when females date in a way that is like dating, say you went to an anime festival, right? An anime con, right? Where people dress up like cartoon characters, like movie characters. And someone dressed up like Captain America. And a female dates him instead of dating the righteous person. And every female does that. That's very much how the concrete jungle works. That's why they used to wear wigs. They put on a certain, fake persona. And then they define their social order based on those fake personas. So you have all these propaganda heroes in the news, this guy who tackled a school shooter. A lot of these events are almost certainly staged. They occurred, but the government kind of guided them along the way and planted people in certain areas that are very likely, to say the least, to have a mass shooting, and they have some dude tackle them and say, "Yay, I'm a hero." There's various ways you can set the stage to do that. It's like magic tricks. It's stupid. There's technologies that assist them, what have you. Okay, but that's not what this video is about. But it helps you understand the idea of fake heroes and how it's not cute. When you use deception to get attractive females and everyone and their mom is doing so, and the heroes, the real heroes, the righteous, are being screened out and thrown under the bus, that is pure evil. And keep in mind, there's 9 million people that starve to death every year in the world, 3 million of them children. That's 10,000 plus children every single day. Why people play this stupid theater arts game, which is characteristic of the concrete jungle. Okay, so again, for those who are wondering why I brought up the movies, right? It's even called putting your moves on her, right? Because you have the theater of war, you have Dionysus, the deity, who's a young Zeus, who's like the central idea or figure or governing class movement or governing class spirit of Western culture. And that involves everyone playing a theater arts game. Okay? And so you also have his father, Saturn, whose name includes the part Satyr, which is a demon that Pan is based upon. Okay? And Saturn is a deity of role reversal, but not necessarily one-to-one. Not necessarily, it's jigsaw puzzle more than saying, hey, Lex Luthor is magically Superman or something. It's more like mixing things together to confuse you. That's what Dionysus is about, confusing you. And he has these kind of nymphs that help him out, right? Called Maenads, and they're sex cult people, where we get the word nympho. And you have satyrs that are helping him out. And those are the minions, right? It's like Santa and his elves, right? The minions are Santa in the festival of Saturnalia, Saturn, and the elves are satyrs who are presenting themselves as more benevolent beings, which, and those elves are really demons. And Santa is Satan scrambled, and it's based on Saturn and the satyrs. Okay. Now, if you think about it, you look into it, you'll see that I'm exactly right. There's no other way it could be. This is not some theory. That's what it is. Point number 4. Now let's talk about confusions and suicide. Some of you might say, well, what does that have to do with confusion? You should already know. Confusion. They're fusing people with the con. Marriages, when the two become one flesh, it's a confusion of flesh. They've yoked themselves to evil. And in the midst of this, there's hundreds of thousands of attempted suicides every year. Hundreds of thousands of people attempting suicides every year. And they're thinking to themselves that no one understands them. Understands. Underworld. Hello. Hell. Help has the word hell in it. And the word SOS is a play on word for sows. Sowing your seed. And people saying, so what? They say they're not going to help them because they're not sowing demons. If they do sow demons, they're going to torture them, because most of these people who commit suicide, almost all of them, are people who are the children of people who were in evil reproductive cycles, okay? And their form of evil and the exact way they think made it harder for them to assimilate into the evil construct. And so they felt desperate, and maybe they were abused, maybe they were raped, maybe they lost their job. Something occurs and they feel like they can't get help. And again, the word hell and help is there. The word hell is the word help for a reason. And so they gave up. A lot of them don't even know if they want to kill themselves or not. So a lot of these attempted suicides are really like cries for help. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Point number 5 is, how far do you think it is okay for them to go with it? So for those of you who are like, well, that's just how it is, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if they told you that they're playing a game and they want you to eat your family, it's part of the game, would you say that's just how it is? If everyone else was doing it, and they randomly picked people, and would you just eat your family and dust yourself off and go forward? There comes a point when you're a psychopath, clearly, for helping them out, and we're way past that point. And again, that was being used as an example. Maybe that occurs somewhere somehow, I don't know. But that was being used as an example. So there's more than one form of psychopaths, right? There's a psychopath who's more like Hitler, who's like aggressive. There's a more strong psychopath in prison, who works out all day and wants to kill people. There's more beta psychopaths, like, Jigsaw is depicted, the puppet, right, from the movie Saw, right? The Riddler, the Joker, they're more beta, skinny, kind of clown, fraternity-like dogs. Lots of fraternity people are these kind of pussy psychopaths. And so some people, everybody who is outside the divine order is being forged to be a psychopath because it's a dog-eat-dog culture. What do you call dogs that eat other dogs to survive and reproduce? Dogs that eat dogs to survive. Right? They're like cannibals. They're psychopaths. They're rabid dogs. The word rabbi is like the word rabid. No offense to anybody, but I don't think that's a coincidence. And I'm not saying that means this, that, or the other thing to maintain the rules on YouTube. Okay. To maintain not breaking the rules, so on and so forth. Not that I respect the rules. It's a story for another day. So, how far do you think it's okay for them to go with it? You think the fact that there's tens of millions of preventable deaths around the world every year means nothing? Of the 9 million people that starve to death, how many people are on the verge of starving to death? Since this time last year, 9 million people or so have starved to death and died of hunger-related issues. So how many other people, how many millions of other people were on the verge of starving to death but happened to make it through the year? So there's a lot of suffering, a lot of rape, a lot of child molestation, a lot of horrible things that occur that are preventable, and they're result, the expected output of the cultures that they have. There's a reason why Christmas is Satan's like favorite holiday, except for maybe Valentine's Day. It's a story for another day. Now, why is that? Well, you have the romance, right? People get engaged on Christmas. They buy their fiance or their wife a nice, nice jewelry or something nice. They buy their girlfriend. It has romantic implications, and again, romantic, right? Romantic, and it has implications on materialism, right? You can't serve God in money. Point number 6. Kind of lost my train of thought here, so I'm just going to finish these last 2 points, wrap this up here, going over time anyway. Okay, point number 6. I'm going to double down on the idea of the true idea that they are doing something purely evil by controlling reproduction, right? The word eugenics was coined in England by Francis Galton. America is part of what is known as the Anglosphere, the English sphere of influence. People speak English here. The Freemasons, which were very instrumental in making this country, are a group that started in England in terms of their Western form. Some of them claim that they trace the roots to Egypt, but the simplest answer, they're a group that arose in England for the purpose of English supremacy. And, when we think of the people with the wigs and stuff, we think of the English first and foremost, I'd imagine. As a society, that's what people tend to think of. So you have this kind of disassociation, right? And part of what's interesting here is that most Americans have a fairly low opinion of English people. And that's very interesting, how that works out, right? Because quite often they're trying to sneak their characteristics into society and make them seem superior. You would think that they were doing that in order for them to get people to think of them as superior. But we don't think of them as superior. In America, we generally think of English people like Mary Poppins, the English royals, Prince Andrew. We generally think of them, Americans generally think of English culture as inferior, that's what they think, right, to American culture, whether it is or not. Okay. And of course, in my other videos, I bring up the wordplay of the word limit, the derogatory term for English people, right? The first part of it is lime, the last part of it is E. You put it together, right? Lime, then this next part. And it's in the word limit because they want you to be less than the English, and it goes back to bless and be less. And that's, we look at the Anglican Church and over marriage and who can marry who and why. They broke away from, the Catholic Church and so on and so forth. If I'm not mistaken here, I'm pretty sure they were Catholics first and they broke away and created that church there. Okay. So we also hear the saying, tally ho, right? Tally ho. And again, it goes back to eugenics, which was coined by an Englishman, Francis Galton, who was also a Freemason and a very respected Freemason. He was a scholar and so on and so forth. He's an evil, evil person. And of course, they influenced America, who in turn influenced the Nazis, which gave us World War II and all this stuff, the concentration camp and Nazi eugenics and so on and so forth. And before that, the Jews had praised the eugenicists here in America before World War II. And after that occurred, they started being mad because they were going a different way with it. They wanted them to praise people like, Thomas Paine, people like Thomas Jefferson, people with Jewish kind of features, right? Judeo-Christian culture. And when they started praising people with more Nordic features, and the Jews had trouble making their case, they sort of, backed away from it. And just like with Hitler, a lot of these guys funded Hitler, the Zionists, because they wanted Jews to leave Germany. And so they had vested interest with Jews being mad at Germans. And they felt they had enough power in the world to contain the anti-Semitism, which is basically what's happened here. But, the governing class are basically whites, Jews, and LGBT people, especially English people, especially Ashkenazi Jews, what have you. Okay. Now, obviously, obviously they don't tell me what to do, right? I serve only God. So now let's go ahead and go to, I pretty much covered them. I could go on and on about why it's wrong for people to marry based on these things. And to make a long story short, say you have, say your great grandparents, were people who used to lynch people, and they did the black faces thing, and they're in some fraternity, and they have a kid based on those cultures. And over time, your grandparents, right, when they meet each other, right, they're from two families that did that, right, and they have a kid, and they're kind of concealing what's going on. The eugenics continues, the racism continues, the corporatism continues, the massacre, okay, the Dionysus culture, and they say these are our values, right? And then your parents are from two different families who also did that, right? So you see how this reinforces it. It's laid on thick, right? It's like a generational building, Freemasonry, right? Bricks being laid, one layer after another, right? And they've built this foolish building of concrete jungle thinking, fake Christianity, what have you. And you see how Christianity emphasizes the concrete jungle dress and architecture and things like this. This is why Stephen the Martyr said that the Spirit of God does not live in buildings built by human hands. That was aimed at the concrete jungle philosophers, the pagans, the Greeks, first and foremost. In the cults of Dionysus, which a lot of Jews were part of, Dionysus is a young Baal. Zeus' equivalent is Baal. So there was Jews just like, in the Bible, they're worshiping Baal. And they were basically running the show all throughout Roman history. They're running the show for the Jews. And they were aligned to Jupiter, okay, who is the Roman version of Zeus and Baal and Set, so on and so forth. Right? A diva of storms, rape, chaos, theater arts, what have you. Thus the snake is said to be crafty, and the craft, and the cults and the guilds of Rome. So point number 7. No logical path should lead to attractive females dating scum. To help you understand why the dating part is wrong and how it feeds into the suicides, right? People talk about sexual healing and they're cuddling and they're going on dates and they feel on top of the world versus this broken dating system we have where people are married often commit suicide. There's a 50% divorce rate. It's just broken from the bottom to the top. And at one point, 2 out of 3 young males were said to be single, where only 1 out of 3 young females. Which goes back to that ancient serpent of the devil, right? The word old and the word cold, and the word old and the word gold, and the word old and the word bold, right? The golden rule, right? The G, old. The G being the earth deity of Rome. That's why you get the word geopolitics, G-O, right? Global, earth politics, world politics, what have you. So no logical path leads to attractive females dating scum. Say, for example, you have an attractive female. I don't know. Let's say, who's an attractive celebrity historically here? We'll just say Jennifer Lopez, okay? When I was younger, I thought she was kind of cute. Never been a huge fan of her. We'll just throw that out there. Okay, and I don't care who she's dating right now. I only care as much as a righteous person does. I'm just, throwing something out there. Now, if she decides that she's going to date, some corrupt politician or something, okay, that's a mistake. But at least it's one person. But if we get all the attractive females tend to date bad guys, and it's like across the board like it is right now, I perceive it to be 100% across the board at this point, and I'm right to some degree. It's just to what degree? How evil are they? It's not a matter of they're dating evil guys. They are. It's just how evil are they? Because they're all cheating me out of my right to lead wittingly or otherwise. Now, what else are they doing? So no logical path of a sane ruler or society or government or governing class leads to these females dating bad guys, dating based on money and mere human rules, customs, and traditions, and tribal traditions, and cult tradition. That's sick. Political groupings and who they're dating people of their despicable, shallow, worldly, heavily flawed political ideology. From their political school of thought. I'm having trouble speaking, so let's just wrap this up here. If an evil person wants to trick an attractive female to date him, is it fair for him to be able to do that? No. If all attractive females have been tricked for generations and they're incapable of choosing a righteous person, is it fair for the righteous man to be cheated? And I'm not talking about what the white man, the white oppressor, the white supremacist would define as righteous, because they use the woke straw man and they use white supremacy scales. But I'm talking about someone who's actually righteous, not somebody who, is seeking to benefit from the unjust gains of the governing class who are trying to rig the deck to confuse you about who to date, and they're trying to call good evil and evil good, and trying to call wickedness righteousness and righteousness wickedness. So no logical path ends up with attractive females dating wicked people. Like they say, you follow the women, follow the pussy, and follow the money. Excuse my French, but that is how they say it. When you follow those things, it's crystal clear. Why do 50% of Americans, the top 50% in terms of finances, have 162 trillion, while the bottom 50% have only 2 to 4 trillion? Why are attractive females dating scumbags across the board? Because the concrete jungle is evil. And it massacres people with suicides, drug overdoses, gang violence, poor health, and on and on and on. Thank you.